Hey! Get your filthy hands off the railing! Are you deaf? Get down now! Look at you. You reek of poverty. You can't even afford a bus ticket, let alone breathe near this plane. Security! Security! There's an intruder. He looks dangerous.
She snapped her fingers at him, like shooing away a stray dog.
Ma'am, my name is Harrison Taylor. I am the owner of this plane.
Her lips curled, utterly disgusting.
You own this?
She laughed, stepped forward.
Get out of here before I have someone drag you out like trash!
The man stared straight into her eyes. She had no idea. He would ruin her career in just 10 minutes. 5:30 in the morning, Calabasas, California. The sky was still bruised purple when Harrison Taylor stepped barefoot onto his kitchen tile. The floor was cold. The house was quiet. A 5-bedroom ranch. No marble columns, no fountain in the driveway, no iron gates with gold initials. Just a house. A home. The kind of place you'd drive past and never look twice at. He poured his own coffee. Black, no sugar. The mug was chipped on the rim. A faded Air Force logo on the side that he'd carried through 3 deployments and 14 years of building a company from nothing. He never replaced it. Some things earn the right to stay broken. His dog, Colonel, a mutt he'd rescued from a shelter in Long Beach, patted over and pressed his nose against Harrison's knee. Harrison scratched behind the dog's ears without looking up. His other hand swiped through a flight manifest on his tablet. Departure, Van Nuys Airport. Aircraft, Gulfstream G700. Tail number, NPAH1. Destination, Aspen. Passenger count, 1. Him, Harrison Taylor, 52 years old. Founder and sole owner of Pinnacle Aerospace Holdings, a private aviation and defense tech conglomerate valued at $4.8 billion. 40-plus jets, government contracts, a luxury charter division called Pinnacle Elite that flew executives, celebrities, and heads of state. But none of that showed on the outside. Not today. He pulled on a pair of faded jeans, a plain gray polo. No watch, no chain, no cufflinks, no monogram. He laced up a pair of worn sneakers and grabbed a canvas duffel bag from the hallway closet. This was deliberate. Always had been. He'd said it once in a Forbes interview. The reporter had asked why a man worth billions dressed like a high school football coach. Harrison had smiled and said, "If you need a logo to feel important, you aren't." But there was more to it than humility. Harrison tested people. He had learned, growing up in Compton as the youngest of 4, that the fastest way to see someone's true character was to remove every visible sign of status. His mother cleaned office buildings at night. His father drove a city bus for 31 years. Neither of them ever owned anything with a designer label, and both of them taught him the same lesson. Watch how people treat you when they think you're nobody. That's who they really are. He kissed Colonel on the head, grabbed his keys, and walked out to the driveway. A dusty black Ford F-150 sat under the carport. Not a Bentley, not a Range Rover. A truck with mud on the wheel wells and a crack in the windshield he kept forgetting to fix. He drove himself. No driver, no entourage. Just a man and a truck heading south on the 101 toward Van Nuys. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, a Gulfstream G700 sat gleaming on the tarmac at Van Nuys Airport. The morning heat was already building. Waves of it rippled off the asphalt like liquid glass. The smell of jet fuel hung in the air, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. A line of private aircraft stretched down the row, each one whiter and shinier than the last. Captain Greg Sullivan, 58, was doing his walk-around inspection, checking flaps, landing gear, tire pressure. He had been flying for Harrison for 6 years. He knew the man, respected him deeply. Inside the cockpit, First Officer Derek Adams ran through his pre-flight checklist. 34 years old, quiet, professional. The kind of pilot who double-checked everything twice. And in the cabin, there was Candace Moore, 29. Blonde hair pinned into a tight bun, pressed uniform. She moved through the cabin like she owned it, adjusting champagne flutes, straightening throw pillows, misting the air with a light vanilla fragrance. Every surface gleamed under her hands. Every detail was precise. She had been with Tentacle Elite for exactly 3 weeks. Before that, she worked for a commercial airline. She left, or was asked to leave, after what HR called a personality conflict. The details were vague. The pattern was not. Today, she had one instruction. The owner of this aircraft would be boarding for a personal flight. His name? H. Taylor. No photo, no description, no further details. She assumed he would arrive in a black sedan. She assumed he would be wearing a suit. She assumed he would look like every other wealthy man she had ever served. She assumed wrong. Harrison's truck rolled into the private aviation lot at 7:15. The sun had climbed above the San Gabriel Mountains and was pressing down on Van Nuys like a flat iron. Heat rose from the asphalt in waves. The air tasted like fuel and dust. He parked in an open spot near the hangar. Not a reserved space, not a VIP area, just a spot. He cut the engine, grabbed his duffel bag from the passenger seat, and stepped out. No driver holding a sign, no assistant trailing behind, no polished shoes clicking across the pavement. Just a man in a gray polo and worn sneakers walking toward a $65 million jet. He could see it from 50 yards away. The Gulfstream G700 sat at the end of the row, its white body catching the morning light. Tail number NPAH1 was painted on the fin in clean, dark letters. His plane, his company's flagship, the one he had personally configured. Every seat, every panel, every detail. He walked toward the air stairs with his bag slung over one shoulder. His sneakers scuffed the hot tarmac. A ground crew member near the fuel truck looked up, gave a nod, and went back to work. Nobody stopped him. Nobody questioned him. Until Candace. She appeared at the top of the air stairs like a guard at a checkpoint, one hand on the railing, one hand on her hip. Her eyes locked onto Harrison the moment he reached the bottom step. She didn't say good morning. She didn't smile. She didn't ask how she could help. She just stared. The kind of stare that starts at the sneakers, climbs to the jeans, pauses at the polo, and finishes with a conclusion already made. Harrison put his foot on the first step. "Excuse me," her voice was sharp, loud enough to carry. "Where do you think you're going?" Harrison looked up. "Good morning. I'm heading to my seat." She didn't move. "Your seat? On this aircraft?" A short breath through her nose, almost a laugh. "Sir, this is a private charter. This plane doesn't fly commercial routes. I think you're looking for the main terminal. It's about a mile that way." She pointed east, the direction of the public airport, where the regular people flew. Harrison took another step up. "I'm not looking for the terminal. My name is Harrison Taylor. This is my aircraft." Candace tilted her head. The way someone tilts their head when a child says something ridiculous. "Your aircraft." She repeated it slowly, like tasting something sour. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." She turned to the ground crew member near the fuel truck. "Hey, did you let this man onto the tarmac? He's not authorized to be here." The crew member looked confused but didn't respond. Harrison remained on the third step. His hand was steady on the railing. His pulse hadn't changed. This wasn't the first time. "I can show you identification," he said. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. Driver's license, State of California, Harrison James Taylor. The address matched the aircraft registration. He held it up for her to see. Candace glanced at it. Not read, glanced. The way you glance at a street flyer before tossing it in the trash. "Anyone can print a fake ID," she said. "You think I was born yesterday? I've seen scam artists try to board private jets before. You all have the same story." She waved the license away with the back of her hand. "Step down from the stairs. I'm not going to ask you again." You all. 2 words. Small enough to miss if you weren't listening. Heavy enough to land if you were. Harrison's jaw tightened. Just slightly. A fraction of an inch. He slid the license back into his wallet. "Call the charter office," he said calmly. "They'll confirm who I am. I'll call whoever I want to call, but you're not setting foot in this cabin until I say so. Now step down and wait on the tarmac." Not in the lounge, not at the bottom of the stairs. On the tarmac, in the sun, on the asphalt. Like a delivery driver waiting for someone to sign a clipboard. Harrison didn't move. I'm going to board my aircraft now. If you take one more step, I'm calling the police. Try me." He took one more step. That's when Derek Adams appeared. The first officer stepped out of the cockpit, drawn by the sound of raised voices. He looked down the air stairs and saw Harrison, a black man in casual clothes, being blocked from boarding by a flight attendant turning red in the face. Derek had never met Harrison in person. He'd been hired recently, but he recognized that something was very wrong. "Candace," he said carefully. "Hold on. I think this might actually be Mr. Taylor. Let me check the—" "Go back to the cockpit, Derek." She didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Harrison. "I've got this under control." "Candace, maybe we should just verify—" "I said go back." Her voice dropped. Not loud anymore. Cold. The voice of someone who had decided she was right and would rather break than bend. "I'm the senior cabin crew on this flight. This is my call, not yours." Derek hesitated. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Harrison. Harrison looked back at him. Their eyes met for half a second, long enough for something to pass between them. Understanding. Maybe regret. Derek stepped back toward the cockpit, but he didn't sit down. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a contact, and typed a message. The contact name, Lorraine Foster. The message? "Something is very wrong on the tarmac. A woman on our crew just refused to let the owner board. It's getting bad." Back on the stairs, Candace had taken 2 steps down toward Harrison. She was close now. Close enough that he could smell the vanilla fragrance she had sprayed in the cabin. "I'm going to say this one last time," she said. Slow, deliberate. Each word bitten off and spit. "Get off these stairs. You do not belong on this aircraft. You will never belong on this aircraft. Whatever little fantasy you have in your head about owning a plane like this, wake up. People like you don't own planes. People like you clean them." The ground crew member by the fuel truck stopped working. He stood there, hose in hand, staring. Harrison's expression didn't change. He looked at Candace the way the ocean looks at a rock, patient, immovable, knowing exactly how this would end. "I'm going to board now," he said. He stepped up, one stare. His duffel bag brushed against her hip as he moved past her. Candace grabbed his arm. Her fingers dug into his sleeve. Harrison pulled his arm back, not aggressively, not violently, just reclaiming his own body. And then she did it. She swung her open palm and slapped Harrison across the face. Hard. So hard his head turned to the side. So hard the crack of it echoed off the fuselage and bounced across the tarmac like a gunshot. Everything stopped. The ground crew member froze. Derek, who had lingered near the cockpit door with his phone still in his hand, saw the whole thing. His mouth fell open. The auxiliary power unit hummed. Somewhere behind them, another jet's engine whined as it taxied toward the runway. But between Candace and Harrison, there was nothing. Just silence. Just the sting spreading across his cheek. Just 2 people standing in a doorway, one who owned it and one who had just thrown away everything. Harrison didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't step back. He turned his head slowly back to face her and looked directly into her eyes. His cheek was red. His voice was steel. "You have no idea what you just did." Candace was shaking. Her hand was trembling at her side, but she doubled down. She always doubled down. That was the pattern. You pushed me," she said. Her voice cracked. "I felt threatened. You put your hands on me. I'm calling the police right now." She reached for the cabin intercom. Her finger hovered over the button, and somewhere in the sky above them, carried along satellite signals and fiber optic cables, Lorraine Foster's phone buzzed with Derek's message. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she picked up her office phone and said 4 words to Pinnacle's general counsel. "Activate everything, right now." 2 airport security officers arrived within 3 minutes. They came in a white SUV with yellow lights flashing on the roof. The tires crunched across the hot tarmac and stopped 20 feet from the air stairs. Candace was already at the bottom of the steps waiting for them. She had transformed. The cold, rigid woman who had just slapped a man across the face was gone. In her place stood a trembling, teary-eyed victim. Her hands were shaking, or she made them shake. Her voice quivered, her eyes were red and wet. She pressed one hand against her chest like she was trying to hold her own heartbeat in. "Thank God you're here," she said. She grabbed the arm of the first officer, a stocky man with a shaved head and a radio clipped to his vest. "That man tried to force his way onto the aircraft. He grabbed me. He put his hands on me. I was terrified. I thought he was going to—" She let the sentence break. Let the silence fill in the rest. She didn't finish it because she didn't have to. The picture was already painted. A crying white woman, a black man on private property. The story wrote itself before anyone asked a single question. The two officers walked toward the air stairs. Harrison was still standing near the top. He hadn't moved. His duffel bag sat at his feet. His hands were at his sides, open, visible, still. He already knew what was coming. He'd seen this script before. "Sir," the first officer's voice was different now. Not the voice you use for a conversation, the voice you use for a command. "Step away from the aircraft. Keep your hands where we can see them." Harrison stepped down, slowly, one stair at a time. He kept his hands open, palms forward. He'd learned that posture a long time ago, not from the Air Force, from being black in America. "My name is Harrison Taylor," he said. "I am the registered owner of this aircraft. Tail number November Papa Alpha Hotel 1. You can verify it with the FAA, the charter office, or the pilot sitting in that cockpit." The first officer didn't verify. He didn't call the FAA. He didn't radio the charter office. He didn't walk 30 feet to the cockpit to ask Captain Sullivan. Instead, he turned to Candace. "Ma'am, can you tell us exactly what happened?" She told them. She told them Harrison had appeared out of nowhere, that he had tried to force entry, that he had lunged at her, that she feared for her life. Each sentence was a brushstroke on a canvas that looked nothing like the truth. But the officers were nodding, writing, believing. Not once did they turn to Harrison and say, "What's your side?" The second officer, younger, with a thin mustache and nervous eyes, approached Harrison. "Sir, I'm going to need to pat you down. Standard procedure." "Standard for who?" Harrison said quietly. The officer patted him down anyway. Shoulders, sides, waist, pockets. Harrison stood motionless. His jaw was set. His eyes were fixed on a point beyond the officer's shoulder, the tail of his own aircraft, gleaming in the morning sun. 60 feet away, Candace watched. Her arms were crossed. Her chin was up. There was something in her expression that went beyond relief. It was satisfaction. The system was doing exactly what she expected it to do. Captain Sullivan emerged from the cockpit. He came down the air stairs quickly, his gray hair catching the wind. He had flown for Harrison for 6 years. He had eaten dinner at Harrison's home. He had met Harrison's wife, his children, his mother before she passed. "Officers," Sullivan's voice was firm, "I need you to listen to me. That man is Harrison Taylor. He is the owner of this aircraft. I have flown for him for 6 years. There has been a serious mistake here." The first officer looked at Sullivan, then at Candace, then back at Sullivan. Candace stepped forward. "Captain, I appreciate your concern, but this man assaulted me. He grabbed me and pushed me. I want to press charges. I have the right to press charges." Tears again. Her voice cracked at assaulted. She looked at the officers with wide, glistening eyes. Sullivan opened his mouth to respond, but the first officer held up a hand. "Sir, we need to sort this out. Mr. Taylor, would you mind sitting in our vehicle while we take statements, just to keep things orderly?" Would you mind? The politeness was a costume. The meaning underneath was naked. Harrison didn't argue. He walked to the white SUV, opened the back door himself, and sat down. The seat was cracked leather, faded and warm from the sun. The air inside was stale, old coffee, sweat, radio static. A foam cup with a brown ring at the bottom sat in the console. The door shut with a heavy click. He was not handcuffed, but he was contained. Through the window, he watched Candace standing at the base of his air stairs, arms crossed, head high. The wind caught a strand of her blonde hair, and she tucked it behind her ear with a casual hand. She looked comfortable. She looked like she had won. Harrison sat still. His face showed nothing. But behind that stillness, a lifetime of moments like this pressed against his ribs. The store clerk who followed him through the aisles when he was 12. The college professor who asked if he was really enrolled in this class. The investor who shook everyone's hand in the room except his. 1,000 small cuts. 1,000 silent bleedings. And now this, sitting in the back of a security truck, watching a woman who had slapped him stand guard over his own property. He exhaled, once, long and slow. Then he pulled out his phone. Inside the cockpit, Derek Adams was already on the line with Lorraine Foster. He was whispering, cupped hand over the phone, his voice tight with urgency. She slapped him, Lorraine, right across the face. Security's here. They put him in their vehicle. They didn't even check the registration. They believed her. Lorraine's voice came through the speaker like ice cracking. Calm, controlled, lethal. Where is she now? Standing on the tarmac, acting like she's in charge. A pause. 2 seconds. 3. Do not let that woman leave. I'm making calls. A local LAPD unit was dispatched 4 minutes later. Candace had insisted on pressing formal charges. The situation was no longer an airport misunderstanding. It was becoming a potential arrest. For Harrison Taylor. On his own aircraft. For the crime of trying to board his own plane. The officer arrived in a black and white cruiser. He was young, mid-30s, clean uniform, polished badge. He approached the scene the way officers approach scenes, with a posture that says, "I'm in control," before a single word is spoken. Candace met him first. Of course she did. She was already walking toward the cruiser before the officer had both feet on the ground. She told her story again. 3rd time now. Each telling was a little more dramatic than the last. Lunged became charged. Grabbed became attacked. Feared for my life became, I thought he was going to kill me. She was crying. Practiced, rehearsed tears. The kind that arrive exactly when needed and disappear exactly when they're done. The officer wrote everything down. He nodded. He used the word ma'am 4 times. Then he walked to the security SUV. He opened the door. He looked at Harrison, a man in a gray polo sitting quietly, hands folded in his lap. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay here while we process the complaint. Do you understand?" Harrison looked at the officer. "Have you verified who owns this aircraft?" The officer hesitated. "Sir, we're dealing with an assault allegation right now. Ownership is a separate matter." "No," Harrison said. "It isn't." The officer closed the door. 11 minutes had passed since Harrison first stepped onto the tarmac. In those 11 minutes, Candace had told her story 3 times. Security had detained the owner of the aircraft without a single verification call. An LAPD officer had taken a full statement from the accuser and hadn't yet spoken to the accused. But in those same 11 minutes, something else was happening. Something Candace couldn't see. Something security couldn't hear. Something the LAPD officer had no idea was coming. Lorraine Foster had made 4 phone calls. The first was to Pinnacle's general counsel. The second was to the FAA's regional office. The third was to Pinnacle's head of security, who remotely accessed the Gulfstream's onboard camera system and confirmed that all 4 cameras had captured every second, every word, every gesture, every slap in high definition from 2 angles. The fourth call was to Harrison himself. His phone buzzed in the back of the SUV. He looked at the screen. "Lorraine's name," he answered. She spoke for 12 seconds. He listened. Then he said one word. "Good." He hung up, put the phone back in his pocket, and folded his hands again. The same position. The same stillness. The same face that betrayed nothing. But now, behind that stillness, there was something new. Not anger. Not revenge. Something quieter than both. Certainty. While Harrison sat in silence, his world was already moving. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to argue. He had people. He had infrastructure. He had 4 cameras and a legal team and 30 years of building something that couldn't be torn down by a slap. And in about 2 minutes, every single person standing on that tarmac was going to find that out. The LAPD officer's radio crackled. Static, then his supervisor's voice. Clipped, urgent, the kind of tone that makes a young officer stand up straighter without thinking. The conversation lasted 15 seconds, but 15 seconds was enough to rearrange everything. The color left his cheeks like water draining from a sink. His jaw went slack. His pen stopped moving mid-word. He looked down at the notepad in his hand, the one filled with Candace's 3 versions of a story that was about to collapse, and slowly closed it. His fingers pressed the cover shut like he was sealing something he wished he'd never opened. He walked to the security SUV. His boots scraped the asphalt faster than before. He opened the back door. Mr. Taylor. The authority in his voice was gone. Something else had replaced it, something that sounded a lot like fear. I sincerely apologize. You're free to go. Immediately. Harrison didn't rush. He looked at the officer the way a man looks at someone who just realized the ground beneath them has shifted. What changed? The officer swallowed. We've received confirmation from your legal counsel, the FAA, and the Aircraft Registration Authority. You are the sole registered owner of this aircraft. A pause. His eyes dropped to the ground. We also understand that onboard security cameras recorded the entire incident. Harrison nodded once. He stepped out of the SUV slowly, straightened his polo, picked up his duffel bag, brushed the dust off the strap. He didn't hurry because hurrying would mean this moment had shaken him. He refused to give it that power. He turned and walked toward his jet. The sun hit the fuselage and threw a sheet of white light across the tarmac. His sneakers were steady on the asphalt. His shadow stretched long behind him. Candace was still standing near the air stairs, still in position, still wearing the expression of a woman who believed she had won. But the scene around her had shifted like a stage rotating mid-act, and she hadn't caught up yet. Harrison was no longer flanked by suspicion. He was flanked by the LAPD officer and both security guards, not as escorts for a detainee, but as men quietly clearing a path for the owner. The officer turned to Candace. His voice was flat. No warmth remained. Ma'am, Mr. Taylor is the registered owner of this aircraft, confirmed by the FAA, the charter company, and his legal team. The allegations you reported are inconsistent with available evidence. Candace blinked, then blinked again. Her mouth opened, but the words jammed. That can't. The owner is. He's supposed to be. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Everyone on that tarmac heard the words she swallowed. Captain Sullivan appeared at the top of the air stairs. 6 years of professionalism held his voice steady, but his eyes were burning like coals behind glass. The owner, Candace, is the man you just slapped, the man you called trash, the man you had put in the back of a security truck, the man who signs your paychecks. Derek stepped forward, phone raised. The screen showed Pinnacle Aerospace's website, the Our Founder page. Harrison Taylor's face, smiling, tailored suit. The same man standing on the tarmac in a gray polo with a red mark still fading on his cheek. Derek swiped. Forbes. Harrison Taylor, the quiet titan of American aviation. Swiped again. Bloomberg. A net worth figure with a B at the end. Again. A photograph of Harrison shaking hands with the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon. Candace's face cycled through stages like a machine breaking down in slow motion. Confusion. Denial, recognition, then the final gear snapping, fear, raw, unfiltered, bone-deep fear. Her legs softened. She grabbed the railing to keep from folding. The blood left her face until she matched the white fuselage behind her. Harrison walked past her without a word, up the air stairs, into the cabin. He sat in his seat, the one he had personally chosen, in the aircraft he had personally configured, in the company he had built from a single hangar and a borrowed wrench. He set his duffel bag on the floor. Then he looked at Candace, frozen in the galley like a woman watching her own house burn. You are terminated. His voice was calm, even, like reading the terms of a contract that had already been signed. Effective immediately. Your employee file will reflect the following: physical assault of the aircraft owner, gross misconduct, racial discrimination, filing a false report with law enforcement. Each word landed like a nail driven into wood. The security cameras on this aircraft recorded everything. Every word, every lie, including the slap. That footage is already with my legal team. Candace broke. The mask didn't crack, it shattered. Real tears now. Ugly, gasping, desperate tears. Her hands clasped together in front of her chest like a prayer offered too late. "Mr. Taylor, please, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you were. It was a terrible mistake. Please, I'm begging you." Harrison looked at her, steady, unmoved. The red on his cheek had faded. His voice had not. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong here. That wasn't confusion, Candace. That was contempt. And contempt has consequences." Security escorted her off the jet, down the air stairs, across the tarmac, into the back seat of the same white SUV Harrison had been sitting in 5 minutes earlier. The cracked leather, the stale coffee, the static on the radio. The symmetry was perfect, and it was just the beginning. The call came before Candace's escort had even reached the terminal. Pinnacle Elite's HR director was already on the line with the general counsel. The conversation was short. The decision was already made. The only thing left was paperwork. Within the hour, Candace received a formal termination letter via email. She was sitting on a plastic chair in the airport security office when her phone buzzed. She stared at the screen with swollen eyes and mascara streaked down both cheeks. The letter was 4 paragraphs, each one a nail in a coffin she had built herself. Grounds for termination: physical assault of the aircraft owner, gross insubordination, racial discrimination, filing a false police report, refusal to verify passenger identity, obstruction of authorized boarding procedures, effective immediately, no severance, no appeal. But the termination letter was only the first domino. Pinnacle's HR department flagged Candace's file in the aviation industry's shared personnel database, a system used by charter companies, commercial carriers, and private operators to screen candidates. The flag was coded red. The notes were devastating. In private aviation, reputation is oxygen. A red flag in this system doesn't close one door. It welds every door shut and bricks over the frame. No charter company would touch her. No commercial airline would interview her. Her name was now a warning label in every HR office in the industry. Candace didn't know this yet. She was still sitting in that plastic chair, still believing she could talk her way out. She had always talked her way out. The personality conflict at her previous airline, the complaints from colleagues she dismissed as jealousy, the patterns she refused to see because seeing them would mean admitting something about herself she wasn't ready to face. She picked up her phone and called her former employer. She needed a reference, a lifeline, anything. The voice on the other end was polite but hollow. "I'm sorry, Ms. Moore. Our policy is that we can't comment on former employees." The tone said everything the words didn't. She tried 2 more airlines. One didn't answer. The other transferred her 3 times before a junior HR assistant told her the position had been filled. There was no position. She hadn't even asked about one yet. Meanwhile, the 2 airport security officers who had detained Harrison were placed on immediate administrative review. The question was simple. Why was the registered owner of an aircraft physically detained without any attempt to verify ownership? The tail number was printed on the fuselage in 6-inch letters. The FAA registry is public and searchable in under a minute. Neither officer had checked. The LAPD officer who responded to Candace's call received a formal reprimand. Failure to interview the accused. Failure to verify basic facts. Procedural bias in evidence gathering. A copy was placed in his permanent file. 3 careers damaged, 2 under review, 1 destroyed. All because a woman decided a black man in a polo shirt couldn't possibly own a plane. But Candace wasn't done making mistakes. She had one more, and it would be the biggest yet. That evening, alone in her apartment in Burbank, she recorded a video. Tears, trembling voice, soft lighting. She looked into the camera and said she had been wrongfully terminated for doing her job. She said she was protecting a private aircraft from an unidentified individual. She called it corporate overreaction and cancel culture. She did not mention the slap. She did not mention the racial slurs. She did not mention that the unidentified individual was the owner of the plane. She did not mention the 4 security cameras. She posted the video everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X. Within 6 hours, 200,000 views. The comments flooded with sympathy. "Stay strong, Queen. Sue them. They can't do this to you." Candace read every comment. She felt vindicated, powerful. She felt like the narrative was back in her hands. She had no idea that in 48 hours, that narrative would be ripped apart frame by frame, by the very footage she didn't know existed. 2 days. That's how long Candace's version of the story survived. 48 hours of sympathy. 48 hours of strangers calling her brave. 48 hours of a lie dressed up in soft lighting and shaky tears, collecting hearts and shares like coins in a jar. Then, Harrison's legal team released the footage. 4 cameras. 2 angles on the air stairs. 1 in the cabin doorway. 1 mounted beneath the wing, wide angle, capturing the full tarmac. Every frame time-stamped. Every second in high definition. No cuts, no edits, just the raw, unbroken truth. The footage opened with Harrison walking across the tarmac. Alone. Duffel bag on his shoulder. Sneakers on asphalt. A man approaching his own plane the way anyone approaches their own front door. Casually, without performance. Then Candace appeared in the doorway. The audio was crisp. Every word she said was captured with surgical clarity. "Get your filthy black hands off the railing. You reek of poverty. People like you don't own planes. People like you clean them." And then the slap. From 2 angles. Her hands swinging forward, his head snapping sideways, the sound cracking across the tarmac. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation, no possible defense. Pinnacle's legal team sent the unedited footage to 3 outlets simultaneously: CNN, MSNBC, and ABC. No exclusive, no embargo, all 3 at once. Maximum saturation. CNN aired it first. Within 90 minutes, every major network had it. Within 4 hours, it was the most watched video on the internet. And then someone did what the internet always does. They found Candace's tearful video, the one where she called herself a victim of corporate overreaction, and placed it side by side with the security footage. Left screen. Candace crying into her phone camera saying she was just doing her job and protecting the aircraft. Right screen. Candace slapping a man across the face after calling him trash. The contrast was devastating. It wasn't just a lie exposed. It was a lie exposed in real time, in her own words, next to the truth she tried to bury. The split screen went viral within an hour. Every share carried the same message. She lied. She lied to security. She lied to the police. And then she lied to the entire internet. The hashtags came fast. Billionaire on his own plane trended for 3 days. Candace Moore became the #1 searched name in the country. Justice for Harrison gathered over 2 million posts in a week. The sympathy that had flooded her comment sections reversed overnight. The same accounts that had written, "Stay strong, Queen," were now writing, "You're disgusting." Her follower count didn't just drop, it cratered. She deleted her accounts within 24 hours, but the internet had already saved everything. Screenshots, screen recordings, archives. The delete button was useless. It always is. Then came the law. Harrison's legal team filed a civil lawsuit against Candace Moore personally. 4 counts: assault and battery, defamation, specifically the social media video in which she publicly accused Harrison of being a trespasser and implied he was dangerous, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and false light invasion of privacy, for publicly portraying Harrison as a criminal when he was the victim. Pinnacle Aerospace's legal department filed a separate formal complaint with the Federal Aviation Administration. The complaint requested a full review of Candace's certification as a cabin crew member, citing her conduct as a direct violation of FAA safety and professional standards. The FAA opened an investigation the same week. The LAPD's Internal Affairs Division launched its own inquiry into the responding officer. The questions were pointed. Why was the aircraft owner detained without verification? Why was the accuser's statement taken 3 times while the accused was never interviewed? Why was a man placed in a security vehicle on his own property, based solely on the word of the person who had assaulted him? The district attorney's office reviewed the footage, all 4 angles, and made a decision within a week. Criminal charges were filed against Candace Moore, 2 counts, misdemeanor battery, filing a false police report. The criminal trial began 6 weeks later. It lasted 3 days. The prosecution's case was built on granite. The security footage was the centerpiece, played once for the jury in full, then broken into segments, then played again. 4 cameras, 2 angles on the slap, 1 angle on Candace's performance for security, 1 angle on Harrison sitting motionless in the SUV while Candace told her 3rd version of a story that grew more dramatic with each telling. Candace's attorney tried everything. Perceived threat. The footage showed Harrison standing still with his hands visible. Good faith safety concern. The footage showed Candace refusing to verify a valid ID and ignoring the captain's confirmation. Emotional distress caused by a high-pressure work environment. The footage showed Candace snapping her fingers at a man like he was a dog and calling him trash. Every defense crumbled on contact with the video. The jury watched it 3 times. By the 3rd viewing, 2 jurors had their hands over their mouths. Deliberation took less than 2 hours. Guilty. Both counts. The judge's sentence was delivered the following week. 180 days in county jail, 30 to be served, the remainder suspended with 2 years probation. 200 hours of community service, mandated specifically with civil rights organizations. Completion of a certified racial bias training program. A permanent criminal record. The civil lawsuit settled out of court 3 weeks after the criminal verdict. The terms were sealed, but 2 conditions were made public. First, Candace was required to pay substantial financial damages. Second, she was required to deliver a formal public apology, written by Harrison's legal team, read by Candace on camera, and distributed to every outlet that had covered the story. She read it in a conference room with no windows. Her voice was flat. Her eyes were empty. The apology was 4 minutes long. She didn't add a single word of her own. The FAA completed its review and revoked Candace Moore's flight attendant certification. Permanently. She was barred from working in any capacity, commercial, charter, or private, in American aviation. The revocation was published in the FAA's Public Enforcement Database, searchable by anyone, forever. The airport security officers involved were reassigned to non-passenger-facing roles. The LAPD officer received a formal disciplinary entry in his permanent record and was required to complete additional training on procedural bias and evidence verification. Harrison held a press conference 1 week after the civil settlement. It was brief. He stood behind a podium with the Pinnacle Aerospace logo on the front. No notes, no teleprompter. He announced that a portion of the civil settlement would fund the creation of the Taylor Foundation Scholarship, a program providing full-ride aviation training scholarships for young black men and women pursuing careers as pilots, engineers, and aerospace professionals. He said one sentence that made every headline the next morning. "I didn't build Pinnacle so that people who look like me would still be asked to prove they belong." He stepped away from the podium. No questions, no encore. The cameras kept flashing at an empty microphone. So where are they now? Harrison Taylor still runs Pinnacle Aerospace Holdings. The company's valuation crossed $5 billion the quarter after the incident. Not because of it, but because Harrison had already been building toward that number for years. The headlines just reminded the world to pay attention. After the trial, Harrison did something most people in his position wouldn't bother with. He didn't just move on. He built something from the wreckage. He implemented a company-wide implicit bias training program across every division of Pinnacle, from the executive boardroom to the ground crew on the tarmac. Every employee, every level, no exceptions. 6 months later, he was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee on racial profiling in the private aviation industry. He accepted. He wore the same gray polo he had worn that morning on the tarmac. Nobody in the room missed the message. The Taylor Foundation Scholarship awarded its first 12 recipients the following spring. 8 future pilots, 3 aerospace engineers, 1 aircraft mechanic, all black, all under 25, all given a full ride to the career of their dreams by a man who had once been told he didn't belong on his own plane. Derek Adams was promoted to captain within Pinnacle's charter division. Harrison called him personally to deliver the news. He told Derek that one text message, sent from a cockpit to Lorraine Foster while the rest of the world stood still, had changed the course of everything. Derek became the company's first internal advocate for bystander intervention training. He now leads a workshop called The Call You Make for new Pinnacle employees. Captain Greg Sullivan retired the following year. 30 years of flying, thousands of flights, millions of miles. In his retirement letter, he wrote one paragraph that circulated through every cockpit and crew room in the industry. He said the incident on the tarmac was the most shameful thing he had witnessed in 3 decades of aviation. Not because of what Candace did, but because the system protected the wrong person for 10 full minutes before it corrected itself. 10 minutes. That was the gap between injustice and accountability. And for most people, he wrote, that gap never closes at all. Candace Moore completed her 30 days. She completed her 200 hours of community service. She moved out of California and relocated to a small town in the Midwest where she hoped nobody would recognize her name. She was unable to find work in aviation. The red flag in the shared database followed her like a shadow with teeth. She took a job at a retail store. Quiet, anonymous, a life stripped down to the studs. A year later, a local news station tracked her down for a follow-up interview. She sat in a beige living room and told the reporter she takes full responsibility for what happened. But in the same breath, she said the media blew it out of proportion, that the punishment didn't fit the crime, that she had already paid enough. The clip went viral again. The internet reminded her once more that she had not. This story isn't about a billionaire getting revenge. If that's what you took from it, rewind and listen again. This is about what happens when someone has the resources to fight back, and what happens to the millions who don't. Most people who experience what Harrison experienced don't own the plane. They don't have a legal team. They don't have 4 cameras rolling. They just have to stand there, absorb it, swallow it, walk away. So what do? We be the Derek. We be the person who picks up the phone. We be the one who says, hold on, I think you might be wrong. Because silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice, and it always sides with whoever's louder. Justice was served. But justice shouldn't have been necessary. The real victory isn't that Candace was punished. The real victory is that this story was told, so that maybe, next time, someone pauses before they block the door. So let me ask you, have you ever been the person who stepped in? Or the person who wished someone had? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And remember, what you do when you see injustice says more about you than what you post about it.